Good evening and welcome to the third public online talk from the Contemporary Art Society for Wales in 2026. I'm Roland Davis, Chair of CASW, and I have pleasure in introducing this evening's speaker, Joseph Hillier, with his talk, Monument to a Moment. Good evening, Joseph.
Good evening. Hello.
Joseph is a British artist raised in Cornwall who has lived and worked in London, New Orleans, and now in Northumberland. He's a fellow of the Royal Society of Sculptors and has created over 30 public works in UK and Europe. Joseph's work is an exploration of humanity relative to the geometry and constructs of contemporary culture. He remakes the human body in various materials, forming his works in the current culture of things. Joseph has agreed to take questions at the end of this talk for those of you who are joining us on Zoom. If you wish to ask a question, just put your name in the chat box, and when we get to the point for questions, I will explain how this works. So, Joseph, it's now over to you.
Well, thank you very much for your kind invitation to speak at your third talk for the year. Welcome to my studio here in Northumberland. I've been in this building for about 4 or 5 years, and I took it on with a bit of work needing to be done. It's the largest studio I've ever had, but it's a sort of Victorian shed. Anyway, be pleased to show you around. So I thought before I started showing you previous works, I'd do a quick tour while there's still a glimmer of daylight out there of the little sculpture garden I've been building. So here we go. Let's have a little wander around the studio. So I'm in the office at the moment. This is the main space of the studio. It's a sort of Victorian warehouse, as you can see, constructed out of wood. When I moved in, there was snow coming in through the roof, so I had to redo that pretty quick. But outside here, this will give you, I'm right in the heart of a Northumberland town called Prudder. This is the studio on the outside. I have a little sculpture garden. It's pretty dark now, but we should get a glimpse of. So here's the building. That's where I'm working. So I've planted and landscaped this space. The light's really going now, I'm afraid. So glooming out of the darkness, you'll see a lot of sculpture. Kind of set into the garden. I'll just try and see if we can see this one. This is called Virtual Mortal. I'll be talking about this piece in my talk. It's a life-size figure. Yeah, no, light's pretty much gone now, I think. So I'll take us back inside. Maybe it's a piece here you can see against the sky, which is quite nice. So this is an abstract work. Figurative piece in aluminium behind. Apologies about the traffic. So and some of these pieces date back 10, 15 years. This is left over from an exhibition at APT Gallery in London back in 2006. The only piece surviving from that show. So yeah, I've got about 20 pieces outside here, and a lot of them made for exhibitions and sculpture parks, sculpture gardens, things like that. So back inside, I'll do a quick tour of the building. I just think it makes it all seem a bit more real, and I gather there's a lot of artists. I've noticed Gerda Roper, who we're friends on Insta, and we've been following each other's work for a while. So it's nice to be talking to artists largely. So yeah, here we are in the space. I'm working on a commission at the moment over here for a town in Oxfordshire called Watlington. I'm going to do an unveiling just for your pleasure. So one of these just came out of a kiln yesterday in Sunderland at the National Glass Centre. So I took it as a big lump of unfired clay and fired it in their kiln, glazed it. It's got a matte white glaze on it. This is called Meander. So this is about 1 meter high and weighs about 150 kilos. So I have some special equipment for lifting these kind of big objects in and out of my van when I move them around. This is another piece in the series. There's 5 heads in total of the series. And they all relate to the sort of architecture, the landscape, and the people of this Oxfordshire town. So there's a chalk stream which runs through the town, which this piece kind of relates to. This is called The Boy Who Never Left the Trees. So these pieces, they haven't been shown at all yet. They're brand new, literally just been fired. So alongside this, I'm working on just my own speculative small scale work, which is abstract pieces. This piece is kind of about physics and holes, I guess. This is an aluminium figure. So these are modeled very much in clay and cast, completely handmade. This is one of the clay heads in process here. So it's been kept wet, obviously. So this one has been made with kind of look for small bricks and figures climbing all over it. So these are the maquettes for the 5 heads for Watlington. So they've got very different sort of surfaces and geometries going on. So that piece is due to be installed this September. And it started out with a series of drawings, which I made in a kind of period of research in the town. So this is like the final drawings after I made probably, 50 drawings and spent a few weeks with the people of Watlington. And that's one of the kind of bonuses of doing commissions for me, is that I get to get out of the studio and meet people. So I'm going to take you down into my basement now, because I'm developing a foundry down here. So it's a sort of like rickety flight of stairs. I'll try not to fall over with my laptop on the way. So this basement, I've just poured a new concrete floor with my assistant just before Christmas, and we had a little kind of open studio event in November. So I've put out a few pieces which relate very much to the theme of my talk today. So the title of the talk is Monument to a Moment. So it relates very much to Messenger, a piece of work which I've made for the City of Plymouth, for the theatre there. And these pieces I've put out because they've all involved digital technology, and they are all dealing with time and trying to capture sort of a frozen moment in time. So this piece was first made in 2014. It's called Virtual Mortal, and it was made, it's commissioned by the BBC, by BBC One, and it was part of their religious programming commission. So it was on Good Friday, it was televised, the kind of full-scale piece. This is a small-scale version. So the piece was made with a disability arts group. So I collaborated with other artists, and I invited the carers and the disabled artists to work together, and they using motion capture, they pose one another, and there was this sort of beautiful moment which I'll go into later. Yeah, so I just wanted to sort of show you some sculpture in the round in the studio. This is one of the maquettes which was made as a series before I made Messenger. So I worked with the actors. This is Marco Boulouet from Frantic Assembly, a kind of very interesting theatre company who use a lot of physical performance, kind of varying between dance and acting. And then perched on the figure, lots of small bronzes of myself working in the studio. So this idea of a monument in progress being made is something that I was interested in with this work. And this is from an exhibition at the Royal Society of Sculptors a few years ago. So yeah, this downstairs space will eventually be a foundry and ceramics area. There's a dark space through here, which isn't even got any electric lighting in yet, but it continues for a bit further. My studio is open by appointment on Fridays. So if ever any of you are up in the northeast of England, do get in touch. I'd welcome a visit. It's always great to have a visitor in the studio. So do just get in touch either via Instagram or email or something if you're around. So we'll get into the main part of the studio, and I'll give you a quick glimpse of the shelves as well. Might see a dusty shelf of objects. So there's quite a few pieces here which are sort of a motion capture piece. I'll get onto those later. More abstract ceramics, abstract bronzes. So there's quite a difference between some of the abstract work and the figurative work, but I'll try and sort of uncover some of the reasons why I think they have more in common, you might imagine. And the importance of drawing as well. Obviously, for most sculptors, it's a way of defying gravity. So these sort of scratchy little drawings end up in you kind of these abstract pieces. So they're sort of like doodles made flesh, you know. So this is oh yeah, I said to Roland, I'll show you this piece as well. This is something I'm currently working on for a sort of sculpture park show. Um, it's a stainless steel sort of three-dimensional drawing, very fluid, has a bit in common with this piece. This is a commission waiting to be installed, a memorial to people lost to COVID in Gateshead. Oh yeah, one more thing, which you might like in the studio. I've got a 3D printer going in here. Oh, it's just finished. So I'm making some very small figures, which are going to be perched on one of those ceramic heads. So these are going to be cast into bronze. I've developed a way of sort of burning away 3D print with wax to cast them directly into bronze. So they're sort of like bronze three-dimensional photographs. And they're taken from community members in Watlington, people I've met down there. So there's going to be a series of portraits of local people perched on one of those sculptures as if they're working together in the construction of the piece. Right, here goes the talk proper. Let's start. I studied here in Newcastle for my undergraduate degree finished in 98. So yeah, last millennium. And then I went over, I kind of worked for a few years around the northeast of England, doing various jobs, working as a research associate at the university in the fine art department. And I got a place in New Orleans. I got a few offers in America, but I was interested in traveling to do my MA. And down in New Orleans, there's a sort of uh, a university called Tulane University, which has a unusual scenario where if you do the MA there, the MFA course, you teach on the undergraduate. So it sort of pays you a little bit while you do it. And it was a full scholarship. So it was a good deal. And it was New Orleans. There was rum at the openings. It seemed like an obvious choice to make at the time. So I went down to New Orleans and I was determined to make sculpture that had a place in the world. Um, I've made my degree show in Newcastle and sawn it all up and thrown it into a skip afterwards, and done a lot of temporary exhibitions in warehouses and things. And I was always interested in making sculpture, but had this tremendous feeling that if I was going to continue doing it, it needed to have a place in the world. And I sort of enjoy the kind of unexpected moment of coming across an object in an unexpected site, in public or in a natural environment. And I felt like this was a sort of taking things out of the gallery context was a way of hitting people in a sort of primal way, which when you're in an art context, you're sort of expecting it. So that's why I sort of focused on this idea of making things permanently in metal, because I knew then I could put them anywhere. So this early body of work was a series of these very primal figures, which have a sort of gestalt power to them, where you come across them almost as animals. They're slightly under life size. They're 80% of my scale. And then these big abstract forms that went with them. So I feel like this early group of works kind of sums up everything I've been doing since, in a way, because I've always been working with technology, mathematics, computing, digital stuff, but also the very intuitive modeled figure. So this is how the whole degree show looked, my MFA show. I cast all these figures in bronze myself. They had a foundry there, which was kind of one of the reasons I wanted to go to America, because they've kept that tradition of sort of making things in metal very much alive, especially in the south of America. So I made all of this work, and I was coming back to the UK, and I wanted to get it back. I was keeping in touch with people back in England, and I chopped up that large egg and I fitted all these things into a great big wooden crate and shipped it all back. And fortunately managed to rent and then sell all of the whole group of works to a corporate collection in the UK, which funded my first studio in London and got me going. So this was the first commission I made, and it's called Generation. It was It's now at Newcastle University. It was originally commissioned by somebody else, but the university bought it up subsequently. So it's three monumental heads, each made in a different alloy of metal, and in a different technique. So the geometries are different, and they kind of relate to, the Northeast's history of making things from the Enlightenment, with, the first light bulb being exhibited and used here, and people like William Armstrong. This is actually the Armstrong building behind. He was this amazing sort of Victorian industrialist who invented hydroelectricity, and he could foresee coal running out, and he was quite an interesting thinker. Had some very bad employment practices. Anyway, so these pieces really relate to that history of the Northeast, and I suppose it was becoming my home by the time I was making these. So I've sort of grown to love the Northeast. So the first one on the right is modeled in clay, cast into bronze, and a very kind of classical process, if you like, very traditional. And then the other two heads in the series were made by taking measurements from that one and reconstructing it. I worked with the landscape architects who implemented this design. I worked with them, sat at their desks with them. We kind of arranged the seating and the plinths to all flow nicely. And I'm really proud that this space is still used, and people really do relax and hang out with the sculptures and sort of have a relationship with them. I think there's a lot to be said for, good installation and design around sculpture as well. Um, I so that was 2005. I made that piece, and up to 2009, I was making quite a few commissioned works as well as gallery shows. And I got this opportunity to make a really large scale piece for the town of Newton Aycliffe, which is an industrial town in County Durham, where trains started being made, and it's a railway town. Um, and I was shown around all these sort of industrial businesses because it was going to be right outside this kind of industrial area of the town, and they were making handrails in one particular kind of steel fabrication workshop. And I knew I was going to have to make something locally if I got the job. So I was interested in this kind of idea of handrails and what I could do with this kind of construction technique. And I was also starting to use digital technology for the first time. So I made a sort of a computer version of this, but this is me scaling it up. So the piece was constructed in sections. This is just the upper section of the sculpture. And as part of the work, this idea of the monument in progress and the labor of the people who lived in the town became part of the piece. So the silhouettes of the steel fabricators I was working with, worked with for about a year. The concept from the very beginning was to have their portraits, their silhouettes as part of the work. So it appeared to be under construction, and this is them at work making that piece. So it had a sort of circular narrative. And this is how it worked with the landscape. It poked out of the trees. It's still there. And most people say about 30 miles an hour as they drive past. And it was very much conceived like a sort of Hollywood sign or some sort of, I guess, having lived in America, I saw this kind of clutter across the skyline, and I kind of always quite enjoyed it, even though it was pretty ugly. So I like this idea of an object which is seen against the sky. It's a drawing, linky black line, and it's very graphic, and it's very frontal as well. Cloud Rockman piece in Sheffield for a school overlooking the North Pennines, made in stainless steel, which was a kind of simple choice, really, being Sheffield. But I was interested in the sense of place, the weather. The first time I went there was a blizzard blowing in horizontally across these hills. And so this piece was constructed in these lozenge-like ellipses of stainless steel, and they related to. I made a hanging installation inside the school with the students using pebbles, which we gilded with silver. So there's a sort of relationship between the interior of the school and this piece sited outside. Uh, so 2014, I think this was an exhibition at the Royal Society of Sculptors. So I was asked to make a new piece for the front of the building on Brompton Road, and I did a gallery show in the front two galleries there, a solo show. So this was really where I made a first big group of work which explored this idea of the handmade and the digital together. So this piece is actually, although it looks like a sort of a computer drawing or something, it's completely handmade. There's no digital technology involved. Um, and it's internally lit. And this it's called Breathe, and the idea of sort of evaporation and expansion as you rise up through the piece, and the construction sort of starts to float apart. But alongside that work, there's so the central piece in this image was made by the lost wax process, very traditionally carved, well, modeled clay, which was cast to wax, cast to bronze, but I put holes in it, so the interior was very much visible, a bit like one of those cat balls or something. And then the other two figures with it are made by a combination of digital and hand making technology. So the piece on the left involved some kind of computer algorithm to generate. So I sculpted the figure, 3D scanned it, and then used an algorithm to construct a triangular mesh, which I sort of dissolved and played with in digital technology, and then 3D printed and then cast to bronze. So that I guess I was just exploring the possibilities of all this new technology with this group of works. Um, and it felt like the opportunity to use 3D printing, 3D scanning, motion capture, all these kind of technologies as a sculptor, this is a bit like photography had been for painters. It felt like 100 years previously. So I guess I was just seeing what are the possibilities of this technology and how can I use it? How can it be another tool? So this piece is called Stasis, and it's sort of suspended in limbo. It has drips dripping down from the foot and up from the head. So that was all made in wax, but over a 3D print and then cast to bronze. So it has a sort of weightlessness. It's hovering. So the bronze was poured into the mold and sort of didn't make it into every bit of the casting, and I kind of enjoyed this and kept it as part of the work. This kind of idea of the frozen bronze, this frozen data, and I have this sort of interest in, I suppose, timelessness and the idea that sculpture as an idiom very much preserves things, especially when you talk about these kind of materials like bronze and permanent materials, steel, stone, etc. So this idea of the timelessness of a sculpture, it preserving something, um, but also to pairing that with this era we're living through where digital technology is so fleeting and we are inundated with imagery, which is not going to be here in another 3 or 4 months. It's just a kind of stream of consciousness. So I just felt like there was something important as a sculptor about trying to sort of capture and freeze this kind of digital revolution that we're living through at the moment. This is where the piece from the outside of that exhibition ended up on. This is a hill fort in just outside Dublin. It's actually somebody's home. This Irish garden designer, he built his home on this wraith site. That's a sort of sacred site. And what was interesting was he had a very ornate garden. Everything was very neatly clipped. This, as you can see, the topiary bush there. But there's one on the left. You see this hawthorn tree, which was very wild, and he wouldn't touch it because it was uh, too holy for him to do anything with it. Um, so this is the piece which I showed you downstairs in the studio, but this is the original version. This was called Virtual Mortal, yeah, and it was shown inside a shipping container. So these were conceived of, these installations, there's 12 of them, and they're conceived of as stations of the cross, and contemporary artists each made a different station of the cross. So I was charged with the sort of Pieta moment, um, and I I sort of studied historical paintings held in back rooms of museums of Christ being taken down from the cross. So this piece is constructed from laser cut steel. The thickness of the steel is the same thickness as a shipping container that it's in. Um, And if you imagine an anvil is probably like 1/5 of the volume of that. So this is solid steel, so it's like a very, very heavy object, but obviously has a very light point of contact with the ground. So this was modeled digitally inside a computer, and I had to work at the center of gravity so that the thing would actually balance and on these tiny points of contact with the ground. But the kind of defiance, I guess, of death, in the Christian story, is what this piece is about. Um, and this is an example of one of those digital meshes that I create in order to make some of these pieces. So this is really, this idea of the monument to a moment. This is where I really get interested in the idea of capturing time. And as a school kid, I was always, when I was 15, interested in art. I was interested in Italian futurism and that very famous Boccioni walking man that we all know. Was always been a reference point for me. So I kind of updated it with a digital version. But there's a kind of a bubble in the casting which I kept in. Some of them I fixed, but I left this one by the arms, this sort of lovely flow. And seeing the interior of the sculpture is something I'm always interested in because I always find it amusing that someone like Barbara Hepworth talks about the hole inside a sculpture and the void, and that whole 1950s sort of angst-ridden post-war era of sculpture always talks about the void, but they never penetrated the skin of the sculpture truly. They sort of made a theatrical hole. So I was interested with this piece and with others, as you've probably noticed, there's holes in the sculptures and you get into that interior space. So from there, I got interested in this idea of motion and capturing it and gesture. And I was also interested in working with other artists from other idioms, if you like. So I was working with contemporary dancers for an exhibition I did at Cheeseburn Sculpture. Um, and these bronzes are about half life size, some of them are smaller than that. Um, but they are really complex kind of bits of motion from very simple kind of fractions of gestures. But I was kind of interested in capturing, very accurately these motions. So using motion capture technology, I was sort of looking at the way somebody moved, making an animation of from that motion capture data, using an avatar, then conflating all these different frames of motion into one object. So I had these huge digital files, which I then 3D printed, so I had to edit down so they were manageable to work with. Um, so these have titles like Bear. So the actor was imitating the motion of a bear, or the dancer, sorry. So, I see a lot of semblance between this very complex figurative sculpture that's capturing a moment in time with my abstract work, which you just saw outside in the studio. So it's all about this idea of movement, gesture, life being contained in an object. So you can see the sort of flow of the head as somebody's dipping and moving, turning, glancing to the side. And there's like great complexity. And I guess, when I watch contemporary dance or any kind of performance, I'm always slightly frustrated because it's so fleeting and it's gone and it's sort of, so I was trying to tie it down and sort of capture it and see it um, with these pieces. A sort of sway of hips and the arms moving, but the body starts to intersect itself. So you get these very sort of abstract forms. Uh, this is quite a different image. So here I'm in a fruit and vegetable market in Lincolnshire. This is another commission. So I was charged with making a portrait of Spalding, which is a small market town. This was about the time of the Brexit vote. So 2016, something like that. And I was going to this is an auction market. So these are farmers coming to town with their fruit and vegetables to sell. And I turned up with a clipboard and a 3D scanner, and they thought I was from the council or something. They didn't trust me at all at first, until they realized I was an artist and I was kind of trying to create a series of sculptures. So I work with them and lots of other people in the town. And again, this is a kind of part of the project which is completely different to being in the studio on your own. You get to meet people and you have to slightly, seduce them into getting involved in your weird project. So I was looking at the historical images of the town as well, from a photographic collection which was held in Ascafie Hall Museum, which was a nice old sort of collection of rural life kind of photography. And then I went to various farms. Some of them were packing stuff for Tesco's. This was broccoli being shrink wrapped for Tesco's by a Lithuanian called Pauline Pindara. Um, and there was lots of like young students essentially just on their year out working in all these farms. A bit like we used to do grape picking in Europe, I guess. My brothers did when I was a kid. Um, so I was interested in this. Kind of drawing a semblance between those historical images of people riddling potatoes in Lincolnshire and the current version of people shrink wrapping broccoli, from other European countries to provide our food to us. So I was trying to make a very sort of even-handed portrait of this town by literally capturing all sorts of people. This is a farmer coming to market he's holding a pumpkin, sitting on his potatoes. So I made these by 3D scanning the participants and then casting into bronze. This is a schoolgirl on her mobile phone. So the way I installed these pieces, they're very small. And for me, this was a bit of a departure. They originally I proposed a large scale piece for them. And then I said, or I could make you 14 small bronzes. And this is what they chose to do, which I was really pleased about because it sort of gave me the opportunity to try out a different way of working and much more playful. So the building that I installed her on is the Gentlemen's Society, which is a sort of 18th century museum, which women have only just been admitted into recently. So that was a sort of an interesting kind of juxtaposition. And Pauline Pindara ended up on a side street. So the way I framed these works against the architecture and the incidentals of drain pipes and cables on buildings was, something I quite enjoyed doing. And they formed a sculpture trail, which was publicized with a map and with a laser etched map on the side of a building and a map you could pick up from the tourist information. So people can go and with their kids or whoever can go and explore with a map and find all these sculptures, and they're quite inadvertent and hidden. And this was a very different approach for me to make a much quieter kind of body of work. This is the postmaster and postmistress of Cobbett, an outlying village of Spalding. And they were a lovely couple, came to a 3D scanning event I was holding at the museum, and they'd lost their wedding photographs. Their wedding photographer had basically lost the negatives. So they'd never had any wedding photographs. So we sort of reenacted their wedding photograph and made this very formal sort of posed 3D scan of them, which ended up on the sort of sixth form college wall in Spalding. And the way I patinated it was really heavy, kind of verdigris green, kept heating it and adding more and more of the patination chemicals. So I got this really sort of encrusted, sort of ancient looking surface on it. But then equally, you see the lines of the 3D print. So I want these objects to feel like they come from this particular moment in time where we've got the sort of new digital technology, which is still slightly clunky. This is a engineer who was responsible for draining the fens. The land around Spalding is very much reclaimed from what were once clam beds and things. So a lot of Lincolnshire was underwater once. So yeah, that's that commission. I'm going to move now on to the research leading to um, the piece Messenger for Plymouth. So this is Frantic Assembly. This is a bit of video footage I took when I was watching them in rehearsal. So they were doing Othello, and they set Othello in a pub, and there's these sort of warring factions, and their work is very gravity defying, which for me as a sculptor was fascinating because they try and make people sort of fly by the way they handle each other. So this person was handed around all the other actors in a very fluid motion, and they really play generously with their ideas. this is Scott Graham in the yellow t-shirt in the middle. He's the director. So this was in the Jerwood space in London. So that, they brought a pool table into this kind of dance studio, and they throw the ideas around. And I think we visual artists, we very much like live in our studios, and we're not very generous with our ideas. I think we hide away a bit. So it's, for me, I enjoy working with dancers, actors, ceramicists, because there's a sort of a bit more collaboration, and I'm kind of interested in, especially as I get older, and I sort of spend a lot of time in a cold shed on my own. It's quite nice to work with other people. So from those kind of workshops in the Jode space, I took all these very rough 3D scans. They look a bit like rough plaster casts. You can see the sort of seams are misaligned on the arm, and they're very much sort of rudimentary, but they have a life to them. There's sort of a poise and an immediacy which I try and take forward into the sculptures, and these give me the bare bones for the poses. So I made an exhibition for the Theatre Royal in Plymouth, which was installed. They had a gallery on the second floor level on the atrium, and I played a lot of these sculptures off the actual architecture. It's a beautiful sort of brutalist 1980s building, which had just been renovated. You see in the carpet below this piece has a pink flash running through it. They commissioned carpets with like these lines running through them that look like something from Tron or some 80s movie or something. So I thought it was fascinating, to see something from my childhood being restored, and I used to go to this theatre as a kid because I grew up in Cornwall. So I used to come up to Plymouth to go to the Panto or whatever. So anyway, I got to play with this building and install these actors, these sculptures of these actors all around the building. This is on one of the columns. This is a small bronze, about the size of my hand. So very small scale. So these are the kind of the bits of 3D scan I was working from. As you can see, they're very rough and ready. And then I got to play with gravity like the actors and install them on the building. So this is a piece I showed you downstairs. And the kind of the structure, the scaffold structure is this is actually the wax. This is the original before I cast it. So these were made in wax because they're the sprues system, the risers. So they're the way that the channels that the bronze flows in and out of the sculpture. But I've very much chosen to keep them as part of this work, because I wanted to sort of create uh, this idea of a monument under construction. So Marco Boulay, the guy who's playing Othello, he was literally asleep at the edge of the. He was a resting actor at the edge of the rehearsal room when I took this scan, and this sort of dreamlike quality I think comes out of his pose. This actor, she was a young actor called Nicola Kavanagh, and it was her first ever gig as an actor, and she was in a small role, kind of chorus, and a part called Bianca. In Othello. So she wasn't the lead or anything. But there was, I took lots of different images and scans and watched them all. But there was this one particular moment where she was in this pose and she was crouching, very small. There's a fight scene. She was about to pounce forward, but there's a real tentative energy to it. And when I did the exhibition, I installed it under the stairs, so it sort of pounced out at you, this piece. And when I exhibited this show, I was chatting to Adrian Vinken, who was the director of the theatre, who's quite a sort of visionary guy. He set up a whole theatre production house called TR2 on the docks in Plymouth as well. So he made a lot of things happen. Anyway, I was chatting to Adrian and I said, imagine you were the height of her knee, and that was outside the theatre. You walk in between her legs, like a sort of archway into the building. And he was really excited by the idea. So we worked on it for a couple of years, really, to get the idea off the ground, to get the funding together, and from start to finish. So the next stage was I made a very accurate model of exactly what I wanted to make over the course of probably a year. So this is working from that very rough type of scan data that I showed you before, but I've completely remodeled the figure and then broken the data down again into these facets. So I wanted this sculpture to feel like it had come out of a creative process. I wanted to have a relationship to the building itself, the brutalist architecture of the theatre, and obviously it came from an actor who was working in that building. So, this, as with all my pieces, that they try when they're permanent and installed in a particular site, I'm trying to find some aspect of that place which I can latch onto and make reference to. So here, obviously, it's a woman who's an actor doing her job. So this is the work gradually being scaled up. So this is a foot on the full scale carved in foam. So it was I'd made a small scale version, which is a tabletop piece, which we just saw. This foot is about the length of me lying down. It's about 5.5 feet long. And the facets are, about something about a foot across, 2 foot across. So it's real. So these are bits of data basically, which I've kept really crunchy and sort of, abstract, I suppose. And here the feet are being cast into wax. So from that styrofoam pattern, a rubber mold is made and wax is painted in thin layers, a bit like an Easter egg, and then supported in these frameworks to they would be stable, the form would be stable. So it's a very fragile object at this point. So this is a lost wax process. And then I was working with an amazing foundry called Castle Fine Arts, who have a site in Wales, um, uh, um, and another site in Liverpool as well. So they made it across the two sites. This is it in Wales being put together. The first time I got the legs out of the shed. Um, so it got constructed in parts like this in Wales and Liverpool, and all the parts were finished to a very high standard. The piece was virtually finished, but then it was chopped up again and transported by road down to the docks in Plymouth. And we put it together in the naval dockyards over the course of a few weeks in secrecy. And then one morning in, I think it was the 4th of March, 2019, we brought her in by barge because she was too big to come on through the city centre because of all the bridges and the wires and things like that. So with the docks are really close to the centre of town. So we got them from the naval docks into the centre of town and then a small road route around to the Royal Parade in the centre of Plymouth. Um, so yeah, here she is coming to the city. It's quite jamboree on the day, quite a surreal day. Um, and this is Messenger installed outside the Theatre Royal in Plymouth. So the scale is there you are. That gives you a sense of the scale. So and the faceting, the kind of the abstraction of the surface of it close up. Um, but the relationship to the theatre itself and the triangular plaza she stands in were all kind of considered formally as part of the work, but also the sort of that element of surprise from the small version I made and hid under the stairs. In a similar way, she's sort of hiding in this avenue. As you approach, you don't see her until you get really close. So there's still this element of surprise and this sort of momentary. I used the word before, gestalt. I often feel with figures, it's something we understand in an animal way when we see a human figure, and it kind of hits you, and you perceive the whole person very quickly. And I'm interested in this idea of like the power of that first impression, I suppose, and the power of an object. Um, so it was important as well. I made her feet. The only bit of Nicola that I undressed were her feet. She actually had trainers on in the original, but I wanted the contact with the ground to be really kind of animal, and so you felt like she was really in the same space as you. Um, and the figure, the ground there isn't flat, so she was kind of engineered to just arrive in the city and land on the ground. This is my studio in Prada, which I've put this image up because I've redone up the building. It was in the right state before, so this has been a lot of my works, especially during COVID. Um, and I'm trying to sort of create a bit of a place by having my sculpture outside. Anything I can keep my hands on for a bit longer, I keep in the studio. Um, and this is the current commission that I'm working on. This was the piece which you saw. It's kind of brown now, but this was when the glaze wasn't fired. This is the basement with those pieces in. The shelves of objects. So you can see the mixture of handmade and digitally made objects here. All sorts of materials from ceramic to stone, silver, bronze. So that's virtual mortal in the garden. So I'm starting to have open studios occasionally. Um, and as I said before, you're always welcome if you're passing to get in touch and drop by. So this is a speculative work again made for exhibitions, which has toured a little bit. It's called Risen. This is a silver and jesmonite piece. This wall behind. This is downstairs in my sculpture garden. I built this during lockdown from all the rubble that was buried in the ground here. I'm working on a series at the moment for a hospital in Aberdeen, and these abstract pieces are going to move with the weather. They're made for hospital courtyards where people are going to be stuck, obviously, in hospital beds, and the staff as well. And these courtyards have no planting since COVID for infection control reasons and budgetary constraints. They're not allowed any plants. So I've tried to breathe some life into these courtyards, and I've proposed a series of moving sculptures. So pieces like this is an early maquette, which twists with the weather. And I was looking at the landscape and the rivers flowing into Aberdeen. So these are all sort of early stage maquettes for that project. And that's a recent piece. There we are. That's my talk done. Roland, I hope that's timing is succinct enough for you there.
It's absolutely fine. Right. Well, you're all now able to unmute yourselves. If you want to ask questions, you just either put your name into the chat box or press the hand, and I should pick that up. Joseph, if you could stop sharing for the moment,
Certainly.
then we can get people. I would suggest that you all use speaker view, which is probably a better way of seeing who is speaking at this particular point. And the other thing I would say is if you've asked a question, can you then mute yourselves afterwards so we don't pick up any extraneous sounds? At the moment, I haven't got anybody asking a question, so I'm going to start by asking about the foundries you use. Now, you obviously have a certain scale that you can do in your
Your pardon.
studio.
Beg your pardon, sorry.
It's all right.
Sorry.
But I mean, these really large monumental pieces, I mean, how many foundries are there that can do this? And what is your choice?
Sorry, beg your pardon.
Not at all.
Yes, so large scale sculpture is always a group activity. There's a certain scale one person can work on. I can make pieces up to about 2 or 3 meters on my own, but beyond that, yeah, it's always working with others. So the large scale work I very much see as a collaboration, and the yeah. So Messenger involved 20 people working on it for over a year, probably, maybe more than 20 people actually, because I work with very, very different companies. So from automotive companies who normally carve foam for, industrial purposes, I got them to carve bits of sculpture. And the bronze fine art foundry world is very much geared towards fine art casting. So I use a lot of bronze foundry, especially Castle Fine Arts I've worked with a lot over the years. But I do have my own foundry setup, so I cast small scale stuff, well, up to life size. So Virtual Mortal, the piece I showed you in my own sculpture garden, that I made entirely in my own studio with my little foundry setup and welded all the parts together. And so yeah, I mean that's a great thing about the sculpture world. It employs a lot of people, and there's a lot of interesting collaboration between between the foundry and the artist. But what I particularly like as a sculptor who casts my own work, it allows me to play with that process in a way maybe that some sculptors might not have that parlance with the whole process. So, for example, the pieces which I showed at the Royal Society of Sculptors were very much made in my own studio, making hollow bronzes with holes in and things from 3D prints. They're all sort of little innovations I've kind of played with myself. And when I've had Chris from the Foundry, he comes to my studio, he's quite interested in the way I'm using, the process in a slightly different way.
And I infer from that you don't have sort of a permanent team working with you. It's
No, it's very much as and when I have somebody who's helping me out at the moment, a couple of days a week, who's an artist as well, and I usually work with other artists. I've had up to 5 people working in the studio sometimes, but often I'm working on my own, so it very much varies based on what I'm doing. So
that's really interesting. I still haven't got any other questions coming through. I'm wondering if I know there are some sculptors taking part in this. So I'm wondering if they've got more technical knowledge than I've got. Have got any particular points they'd like to raise?
Can I put a
Yes, certainly,
question?
Robert.
Thank you. Joseph, one of the things that I'm really interested in is this business of artists casting their own work. Where did you actually learn foundry techniques? Was it in America?
Yes, I suppose that's where I honed it. I had an interest in working with metal from about the age of 14. I worked for a steel fabricator in Helston, where I'm from in Cornwall. So I sort of learned to chop up bits of steel and kind of bolt things together and things. And then I played with lead when I was doing my undergraduate degree, and I got some molten lead in my face once. So I learned that you can't mix moisture and metal quite early on. But yeah, I made a piece of commissioned sculpture. I don't talk about this very often, but I made a piece of commissioned sculpture in 2000, which was cast concrete, and I installed it in New York Tyne Weir, which is very different to New York in the USA. New York Tyne Weir is quite near to the Meadowell estates, where there was a few social issues, this we say in the 90s, and the sculpture got demolished in a weekend after me installing it. And that experience really drove me to think, right, I've got to make things in metal. That I was kind of then I was interested in metal. I kind of realized that was a way forward if you're going to put things outside. So that's when I started researching going to America to study. I mean, in this country, the Royal College teaches metal casting. Scotland has a lot of Scots,
Hardly anymore.
hardly anymore, yeah. Um, Scotland actually has about 7 different sculpture workshops who all work with hot metal. And Scotland has an incredible sort of I think they're just more civic minded. I don't know what it is in Scotland, but that they have a network of really good production facilities. And if you're interested as an artist of, learning the craft, I'd say go to Scotland and, you can rent workshop space by the desk in Edinburgh Sculpture Workshop.
Yes,
And
I've been there.
yeah, it's great. I mean, I just think what a brilliant thing. And that's kind of,
Yeah.
I'm interested in opening up my studio in a similar way going forward in the next, 5, 10 years, where people can come and, make something here.
Yeah.
Because
Do you know that Anthony Gormley has his own foundry up in Hexham
yeah, I know
now?
very well. I know the guy that runs it.
All right.
And yeah, he bought out Davison's, which was a big iron foundry, and he
Yeah.
completely modernized it and upgraded it all. But it just makes his work. He doesn't collaborate with anyone.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, it's an incredible facility, and he pours tons of Corten steel and
Yeah.
iron and things like that at a time. He's got a great big vacuum thing for yeah. It's very impressive, as you'd expect. Yeah, I'm a very
That's it.
different scale of things, but I sort of I don't see I just see what I do as sort of something different, and I sort of enjoy my cobbled together foundry and making it all myself. And the sort of innovation that having less means necessitates.
One of the things you did mention, I'm sorry to go on, but you did mention about Barbara Hepworth not exploring the inside of the skin, as it were, of
Mm,
bronze.
mm,
But Henry Moore did. I don't know whether you've ever seen some of those heads he actually cast in his back garden
No, I
in the
haven't.
1950s, early 50s, and they're made in the same way as the Benin bronzes with strips of wax over a clay core,
Right.
fired clay core. So it's quite interesting that, there were people exploring that inside of the skin of bronze in the 1950s.
Yeah, I mean, Nam Galbo as well was very much
Yeah.
playing with the inside of things and edges, and so yeah, obviously the people were, but I guess as a, my point is I haven't seen very much of it, and people talk about holes of it, but they actually explore that dark, true void, Mm.
Am I muted?
No, you're not. I can hear you.
Okay. Hi. Hello, Joseph. I'm Gerda Roper.
Hello.
Hello.
At last we
Hello.
speak.
Yes, at last. We've been fans of each other's work
Yeah,
for
yeah, quite.
years. Yes, we're Mutual Admiration Society. I think your work's lovely. Anyway,
Yours is.
what I wanted to ask you about was in the rough 3D scans, that you use, like for the married couple, those ones.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's almost like everyone is blanketed. They're very built up. They're not very refined, and that's almost completely different to the elegance of some of the heads that you have and that you do.
Yeah, I think there are limits to that technology. Even the most high-end 3D scanners, they still always infill the kind of creases of things, and they don't have that sort of they don't have the ability to get into the concavities of things, the really
Yeah.
deep creases of things. So they always smooth out a little bit. Um, but I suppose, I'm using it as with its limitations as a kind of
Thought process.
yeah, and a way of sketching, doing a broad brush portrait of a place with all those people. And I guess I see them as artifacts which come out of the technology. They're sort of, using what's at my disposal now. So it's a bit like a plaster cast in a way. They're
Yeah.
seeing, I feel like,
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And then the other ones that I thought were out of the ordinary were the moving figures where you had duplicates of everything. So there's a great elegance to a lot of your work, and then there's a lot of others where there's a lot of other things going on. And I don't know whether you have any preference for the reductive or for the more comprehensive and more complex form.
I think, it's very much different bodies of work are exploring different things. So, those pieces about dancers were exploring this kind of baroque, fantastic kind of motion. So they ended up like that. I guess it's me trying to capture and hold on to something which is very complex and shifting before your very eyes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I suppose what I'm interested in at the moment is I'm really sick of looking at screens, as I think we all are, as we are now, But I never used to wear glasses until I started doing lots of digital work. I'm sure it's age as well, but I I guess more and more I'm just drawn to working with clay, wood, ceramics, lumps of matter, and I think that there's something for me interesting in making a semblance between the gestures of those dancers and actors and the gestures I make by bending a rod of steel. There's a sort of there's a I guess it's all about a respect for that sort of little ball of energy which we have inside us, which is a beginning of a creative sort of gesture happening. And it might be, you elaborately record a dancer moving, or maybe I just bend a rod, and play with it.
Yeah.
So I guess there's a similarity, in my head between those two things. And I guess selfishly, I'm interested in doing it more myself than documenting other people doing it now.
Wow, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, good. Are there any other questions? No? All finished?
Hmm.
Oh, I heard something then. Or was that making supper? You never know on these calls, Joseph, what you're going to get. It's nice of you to tell me that, by the way, that you were fed up with the online process. You didn't mention that when we were setting up.
Well, I mean, it's still part of. I mean, what I'm interested in now is the ability to use 3D scanning to actually just share my work. So I've
Yeah.
been building a new website, and I'm going to have augmented sculptures, which you can then put into your space and look at them. So there'll be a clay object I've made, but you'll have the ability through my website to actually walk around it in your front room. So that's where I'm going with it at the moment.
Well, I will have a go at that. That sounds.
Yeah, it's not live yet, but it's on the way. I can do it. I've found out how to do it. So.
Well, you have to tell us when you go live. You'll have to drop me an
Yeah.
email and tell me it's going live, and we'll experiment with it. So great. I think thank you to those who asked the questions. A lot of insight there. I'm going to ask you all to say thank you to Joseph in a moment. Before I do, if there's anyone out there who doesn't know anything about CASW and wants to find out some more, including how to become a member, please visit our website at casw.org.uk for all the relevant information. Our next public talk will be in October. It's an in-person talk, and it's due to be given by our first questioner, Mr. Harding, sculptor and chair of the 56 group. So we're all looking forward to that. It will be at the School of Art and Design as usual. Unfortunately, Joseph, you'd have to come down if you wanted to see that, because we don't record those, but you'd be very welcome.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
So everybody look out for the details in due course. So if you switch to gallery view.
Thank you.
Everybody unmute and just say thank you to Joseph. Joseph, from me and from the Society, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Merci.
Very good. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Thank you, Joseph. And good night to everybody.
All the best. Thank you.
Thank you.